everyone, and welcome to Formula Facts. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Jack Like.
I'm Destinee Day.
Today, we are going to be reviewing Monaco. It was a very boring Monaco. I mean, I think we both have some different opinions on how we thought it was boring. I think we both thought it was boring. And then we're going to go through and do a little preview for Spain. So let's start with Monaco. Do you want me to go first? Do you want to go first?
I want you to go first. This was the first time you've watched a Monaco race, so let's hear it.
I think you tried to prep me saying it was going to be boring, and I kind of didn't believe you the whole time as you were saying it. I'm like, oh, how boring could it be? You know, it's an historic race. Everybody's talking about it. You know, it's Monaco. Everybody loves Monaco. Oh, my gosh, that was horrible. And I was also saying in our episode last week that I think it was going to be exciting because they were doing the whole two stops thing. I thought that was going to be strategy. Never would I know that George Russell wouldn't take his, first stop until the 60-something lap. Oh, it was so boring. I mean, the only reason I kept on watching with so much intent is because I was waiting for someone to crash. So hopefully Max Verstappen could get the safety car and then he'd be good. But I think the whole idea of the two stop did not work out the way they wanted it to. And I guess we can get into that later after we hear what you thought.
Boring. Not as boring as last year. And last year, we had the crash early on and then Charles wons, but everything in between, the bookend, the meat of the race was incredibly boring. I was curious how the two stop was going to play out. Was not a fan. I don't think it added anything. I mean, just like you said, George Russell, both Mercedes didn't make their first stop until almost the end of the race. Then you had people pitting super early, like the first lap. I forget who pitted the first lap. But somebody did. And the crashes that did happen weren't really that exciting. There was, I don't think the two-stop strategy did anything for the race. It was still boring. So maybe we can try again with a different idea.
I mean, I guess there was a lot of talk about what they can do for next year because there was so much time on the broadcast for them to talk about it. Because it was really I was actually just looking at it, and the first four, in the starting grid finished the same way in the end of the race. So, what can you do? But there was a lot of talk about what they might do next year, and it was pretty interesting how they were thinking about it. It's well, you might be required to make one stop between laps blank, and so it sounds like really there's no idea. But it looks like, George Russell probably could have gotten the whole race with no pit stops. It was crazy.
Yeah.
But they're making them do two. I think the best strategy by far was Isaac Hadjar. He got his two stops out of the way, and and then he was just cruising.
Yeah.
So, and they were really tough.
I was very happy with Hadjar. He did very well.
Yeah. What about Williams and Mercedes? That's a lot of drama right there. Did you see all the stuff between Vowles and Toto?
So Vowles came out with a social media post today, and he was saying we were yelling because it's loud, it's loud, and there's a lot of noise next to the track, and we couldn't hear each other. He was like, Toto's not angry, and I'm not angry. We had to yell to hear each other, and so I wonder how much of a PR spin that actually is versus anybody being upset. But it honestly sounded like Alex and George were totally fine, and Alex bought George dinner, and that was the end of it, right? So it may have gotten blown out of proportion. I don't entirely know.
I think it was definitely blown out of proportion. I think we have to remember, right? Because James Vowles used to work with Toto really closely at Mercedes. And like you said, I think the drivers were upset in the moment, but I think they realized that there's really, and I'm sure Toto realized it too, there's really nothing you could do. They were just doing the best of what they could do with the situation. I think Williams actually did a fairly good job with the whole strategy of Sainz holding everybody back, and then Albon pitted, and then Albon would come back in and then hold everybody back so Sainz could pit. So they did a good job that way. It was actually really nice of Sainz at the end. They told him right away, we want you to switch places with Alex, and he was like, okay, I'll do it, but don't worry, it's gonna happen. So Sainz knew to do the right thing to switch the places back. Yeah.
I mean, I'm a Lando fan. I know you're not. I was happy to see him win. I would have preferred Charles won. That is my preference, but I was so happy that it was Lando and not Oscar.
Yeah, for the sake of the drivers' championship, I was definitely rooting for Charles, and I'd rather root for Piastri, even though it would hurt me and the drivers over Lando. I really don't. Lando really went down in my books this year. I don't know. I still like him. It's just that I don't know. It's hard to root for him recently. I'm looking at the standings, the race results, and I guess I really didn't realize it in the moment, but Liam Lawson finishing in P8, picking up 4 points, and Esteban Ocon finishing P7 and picking up 6 points. So 2 good drivers, right?
Yeah, 2 very good. I mean, who would have thought Liam Lawson, right? I mean,
he must have lucked out.
I mean, Yuki was down in 17. Like, Red Bull, hot mess.
Yeah, maybe they should send over the Racing Bulls strategists over to the actual Red Bull. Let's see what happens, because they between, I guess it worked out right with Lawson, but they definitely had a great strategy going.
Yeah. I felt like Max could have won it if there was a wreck. But there wasn't, and he definitely held out to the end to see if that would happen. But then other than that, I felt like the only person that drove like it was like they wanted to be there was Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah. I mean, I was definitely rooting for a wreck too. It's actually pretty funny. I just looked at the time, like how long it took for them to finish the whole race. So last year, it took 2 hours and 23 minutes for Charles to finish, and this year I think it took Lando an hour and 40 minutes. So it's just like crazy. So if you're Red Bull, obviously they had the right strategy of keeping Max out for as long as possible. I know they were talking about maybe they just haven't finished the race, and then they just have him pick up the 30-second penalty. But I think it ended up would have been more. They said they had to go in there and pit. I guess it really didn't matter. There was no safety car. But I kept on thinking, I'm like, please do not pit. And then there's a safety car. Please do not do it. That's Max luck. But you're right. Great drive out of Lewis Hamilton. Definitely good to show that in the Ferrari because he's been struggling recently. But it definitely was a good drive for him. It's just so hard to get closer to the person in front of you at Monaco. That's why I guess he was going to try to hopefully get in front of Max, but it was really never that close in the end.
Yeah. What did you think about watching Monaco from a historic spectacle perspective? Because this is the race for a lot of people. So curious on what your first initial thoughts on it were.
It was definitely so far the coolest scenic track that I've seen, that I've live watched in F1. It was just so cool to watch, the cars coming out of the tunnel, and then just listening to the different strategies was also very cool. Like I said, you think it's boring because no one's really moving around, so that is what makes it boring. But it's a shame because that track is just so cool, and they talk about all the history. And even if you're someone like me that recently got into F1, that history you can still they talk about all these people and they make it feel they make it modern, right? Monaco. So it was a very cool scenic place to have a race, and it's just such a shame that the race had to be so boring because the cars are huge. Because I remember I was editing the video for Monaco, the reel, and I'm looking at these cars from when they first had the races 1920s, and I'm like, oh, that must have been cool because the cars are this big. Now they're
yeah.
Here with the smaller cars.
Well, hopefully the new 2026 regulations, the cars are supposed to be smaller. So hopefully that will help the situation out.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Probably not.
Do you want to get into this week? We're recording a little late, so we actually have some information on Barcelona.
We're going to have our best predictions. Here we go. I'm ready for it. So now we're going to be in Spain finishing up the triple header. Really exciting home race for Carlos Sainz and Fernando Alonso. I think it should be really exciting, don't you think?
I'm really looking forward to it. I love Barcelona as a city. I keep begging my husband to go back, and I want to go back to this race next year. I'm also kind of torn on next year is going to be the first race in Madrid. And I don't know. I don't know if I want to go to a first race or not. You know what I mean? But Barcelona is an amazing city. There's tons of amazing culture. I think it's a very fun race. They often do preseason testing at Barcelona. Something that our fans have pointed out to us.
Yes, we were corrected.
Well, it depends on what you refer to as often and what often means to you as an individual human person. But Max has a good track record at Barcelona. So I think what we've learned watching all the practices is that you can't count all the teams out. The McLarens are fast, but Red Bull has good pace. Mercedes could make a run for it. I mean, Ferrari's not totally out, so.
Yeah, like I always do, I think I'm going to look back and see what happened last year. So it's actually pretty interesting. Max finished P1 last year, but he did not start on pole. Lando Norris started on pole. So that's definitely something pretty interesting to look at. It was Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, and actually Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes got on the podium. And then in the other Mercedes, George Russell finishing in P4. So definitely should be an exciting race. So far, we've had 2 practices when we're filming this. And between the 2 of them, right, we saw the McLaren was fastest in practice number 1. Lando Norris had to put together a really nice lap. And then Max Verstappen was right behind him. I think I saw something pretty interesting today that Formula One posted, that there was 2 sets of 2 cars that had identical times in a practice. Isn't that crazy?
Was it a McLaren and Red Bull again?
I think it was Lando and Max, and then it was Stroll and someone else. I'm gonna look right now actually, but it was Stroll and Albon both finished with the 1 minute 13 seconds 0.839, which is really impressive. That's like, isn't that crazy?
Lance Stroll actually driving like he wants to be there? Yeah, that's wild.
But that's just like something crazy. Like you always wonder. I saw something pretty interesting the other day. It was like on my phone. It was like, well, what happens if they ever finish down to the millisecond? How do they decide that? I'm like, oh, that's never gonna happen. Of course, now like it happens twice in one day.
There was a time last year when George and Max had almost the exact identical times. They had to take it all like way out there to figure out who got pole.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
What I think is kind of interesting, which I just started seeing right now, finishing the fastest in practice 1 was Lando, and finishing the fastest in practice 2 was Oscar.
It was Oscar, yeah. I mean, the McLarens, it's a frenemies situation over there at McLaren. So I don't know. I'm sure Piastri was very frustrated that Lando won in Monaco, and they both think they should be the number 1 driver, and McLaren won't do anything about it. So I'm just waiting for both McLarens to take each other out this year at some point, because they're squabbling over their own position.
Well, don't you remember last year during Drive to Survive, they asked Oscar, like, how do you feel about being behind Lando? And he was like, yeah, I don't think so. So I think it's definitely very interesting, and it's especially very interesting now that they're, Oscar and Lando and the drivers' standings. If you look at that, which is pretty insane. Oscar's ahead by 3 points, which is crazy. So I'm looking at, anything can happen. Going into Barcelona. If Max pulls together a good race, Oscar could pull together, Lando. They're all right up there.
Or if Oscar DNFs, or if he gets put in the back of the pack and doesn't score points, that he loses drivers' championship this weekend.
It's going to be so tight, and this might be, it's going to come down to one mistake that some driver is going to make, and throughout the whole season. If one driver DNFs, that's going to be the whole season for them. It's crazy that that's what it's going to come down to.
It's going to be awesome, and it's going to be very exciting. I like it when the race and the championship is really tough, because then you're really on the edge of your seat watching every single detail about the race.
You didn't think it wasn't your favorite in 2023 when Max had 575 and the second closest was 285? I mean, that wasn't exciting for you?
No. But you know what was an exciting season? The last year that Max and Lewis were battling it out for the Drivers' Championship, and it came down to the last race. I
Oh
mean,
my!
wild. It was wild.
All of our team Lewis Hamilton fans are going to be so. If anybody watches this, it's going to be horrible in the comments. Oh my god!
I mean, I'm a huge Max and Red Bull fan, but I also have an affinity for Toto. So, I mean,
That was an interesting call. And
did it follow the rule book? No.
but it was all for the drama.
It was scripted.
Michael was all for the drama. Mikey, no. It was all for the drama.
It's just like the NFL nowadays. It's scripted.
Yeah.
But Netflix money.
So, let's get into our predictions, right?
Ooh, okay. I just did my fantasy and the F1 predict part of fantasy, which you should do. Do you do that?
You know what's funny? I told my friend the other day in school about. I told her about. She's really smart. I told her about Formula One, and she's like, she goes home, and the next day I see her, and she's like, she knows all the drivers. I'm like, this is insane. And then she's got the Formula One app, and she's doing F1 predict, and she's like, well, what do you think about this pick? What do you think about this pick? So that's really funny. I need to start doing it though.
You need to do it as soon as we get off of here because it's only open for a couple more hours.
Okay.
It closes at qualifying. So I always end up forgetting, and then I always text you, and I'm like, no, I've made a horrible error. But it's tons of fun questions. And so I had to do a podium prediction today because I remembered to do it, and I went back and forth on it a lot. And then I watched practice 2 and firmly decided on my picks.
Let's hear it.
I'm going to go with a Max Verstappen, number 1 on the podium. I think behind him is going to be Lando Norris, and behind Lando is going to be Oscar. And this is going to tip the scale of the Drivers' Championship for Oscar.
Okay.
I can't tell you why I think Lando's going to be ahead of Oscar. I really don't. But
Now, what do you think about George Russell? You didn't want to put George Russell in?
I debated on George Russell. I went back and forth with him so much.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to put it in mine either. So I was thinking about that too. As you were talking, I'm like, oh, am I going to put George Russell in? I don't think so. Because George Russell finds a way to screw it up every single time. So I'm not going to put George in. Because what's funny with George is he always drives better when there's no pressure. If he ever starts good on qualifying, he always finds a way to mess it up. Which I think is what's going to happen. I think he's going to have a good qualifying and start in a good spot, and he's going to mess it up. So will he be on a podium? Maybe. So maybe what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to stick what you did. I'm going to put Max Verstappen finishing P1. And then finishing second, I'm going to have Oscar Piastri. And then finishing third, it's a tough between Lando Norris and George Russell. But I have to be realistic for once. I think that Lando Norris will finish P3 on the podium, and George Russell will either finish P4, P3, or will DNF. So that's my options for him. There's nothing else in the middle, no middle option. Yeah, but I do think that Oscar will do better than Lando in this race. I think that now Oscar is a little upset after Monaco. I think he wants to go after him.
Yeah, but he doesn't respond always to pressure well like that. Like, look at Australia, right? He totally bombed his home race with the pressure.
Look how he came back, right? Wow.
He did. And who knows? Maybe McLaren, maybe your predictions are right, and McLaren's going to finally prioritize him above Lando because he's ahead in the drivers. Like, maybe they actually do something that makes sense for once. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like Zach Brown's going to find a way to screw it up.
I couldn't with him on the podium in Monaco, Jack.
Oh.
I lost it. I was like, no, he's not going to go up there, is he? And of course, and he was up there, and it was horrible, and it was cringy, and it was, oh no, it was horrible.
Did you see after like Lando won and Lando's there with his dad, and then Zach comes out of nowhere and he's like patting everybody on the back, and it's like, oh my gosh.
Oh, he's so icky. I don't like it. It's icky.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh, yeah. I'm not okay with it. No. Just no. Well, cool. I think next week we will talk about the new Netflix F1 The Academy doc. So that will be exciting. Give you some time to watch it.
I know.
And then we have to buy tickets to the F1 movie. That's
yes, you have to go.
Yeah.
I'm very excited. I already convinced my mom to go. I'm like, Mom, we got to go see it. She's like,
she'll
okay.
love it.
I think she
loves sports. She'd love it.
I think it'll be good.
Yeah, I think so too.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you everybody for watching another episode of Formula Facts. We really appreciate it. Hopefully we have a good Spain Grand Prix. And then after that, we get to do some fun stuff as we have a little bit of a break before the next one. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Jack Like.
I'm Destinee Day.